I'm a designer, I'm going to make this change. And then art comes in and is like, well, wait, but now the pretty thing we wanted to put there that was also functional doesn't work. So what are we going to do in place of that? And then animation comes in and goes, I just spent 2 days making an animation for that thing that you want to change now. Right. So it's like there's all of these kind of constant things that are connected to each other that we have to consider. And that's a big part of like that understanding, you know, the bigger picture of everything that's going on.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, John Diaz, and today I'm joined by Jameson Durall. Jameson is an advanced senior game designer for Insomniac Games, currently working on Marvel's Spider-Man 2. He's a fellow Full Sail University alumni and dear friend who's been an instrumental mentor in this space to me, as well as other grads and developers. He's been in the industry since 2001 and has contributed and led to the design of some of my favorite titles, including Oddworld, Stranger's Wrath, The Simpsons, The Godfather from EA, Saints Row 4, Red Faction Armageddon, and Agents of Mayhem for Volition. Today, we'll be talking about his career as a game designer, what it means to him to be a designer, as well as how that differs from being a design director and being a leader and a manager. Listen to what happens in his career and how to identify when it's time to make a change. And we'll even talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and how that factors into his craft. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. Jameson, welcome, old friend. How's it going? How you doing?
Man, I'm great. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting again.
Yes, we're going to get off to the races if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. You have been in the industry for over 20 years, but it wasn't until recently that you came back in. So you were out of pure game dev for a bit. What brought you back?
Yeah, that was an interesting time for me. So this was all around 2016. I had been in the industry, you know, for, 16, 15 years now. And I'd been at Volition for 8 years, and I kind of got the itch to do a few things at once. And one of those was I really enjoyed the time that I would be back at Full Sail University for alumni events and for Hall of Fame. And I just really liked the mentoring aspect of it. And so I was really curious about, hey, could I do that, in a more dedicated fashion? And when they had an opportunity for me to come down and be a course director in the game design program, that's when I first started thinking about, okay, what would that look like? And then in addition to that, I'd always wanted to scratch the itch with some side project stuff, which isn't as easy to do in our industry, So, and VR was kicking up, and I had some friends that were working on a VR project that I could do in addition to doing that job at Full Sail. So, and Full Sail actually encourages you to continue to work in the industry and do new things, so you have cool things to talk to your students about, right? So I was like, you know what, this is the time. I'm going to go down. I'm going to kind of move into this other phase and see what it's like to kind of focus in on, education and mentoring while also still, doing this game design stuff that I wanted to do. So I worked on a VR project for a bit, and then I got to do something that's been a dream of mine, which was I got to work on a theme park attraction. So the Halo Outpost Discovery that was going around the country, I designed and my team built one of the Pelican trainer for that attraction.
I haven't gotten a chance to get on that ride. It's on my to-do list, right? Whenever the world gets back open again and get to enjoy some of these theme parks and attractions. Where was that again?
We did it. So we based out of Orlando is where we built the thing. The main company that was kind of overseeing the whole development was there. And then it toured starting in Orlando. So I got to be at the opening show at the convention center, make sure everything was good before we then sent it off. And it went to, I think 6 other cities. And it's kind of a big indoor theme park with, there's some rides and attractions. There's a lot of history stuff and museums. And they had like a lot of the actors from the games and stuff show up. So it's pretty cool.
Are there a lot of correlation between game development or game design fundamentals when you're creating an experience for like a box product that carry over into that, or is there a whole separate bag of considerations for like player UX, or just is it like a rail shooter kind of thing?
Yeah, so it was interesting because a lot of the skills are very much the same, right? Okay. So we're using Unity. We were building a game, right? So we focused mostly on the game portion of this attraction. And then we partnered with a company that built the physical interactive part of it. So as we were collaborating and deciding what are those interactions going to be? We were trying out all these different knobs, buttons, and whistles and stuff to like get the kind of experience that we were hoping for, while working closely with 343 to make sure that this fits in the Halo world properly, and kind of encompasses what they're hoping out of a Pelican based trainer attraction. So it was really interesting, and I got to do a whole lot of like making sure that physical and digital kind of line up together, which was a whole new experience, but it was really cool to kind of deal with and work through.
Got it. And so you got to do that in tandem with being a course director at Full Sail.
Right. Yeah. So I would spend, my days doing the Full Sail stuff, and then my evenings and weekends were working on that project. It was a rough year as far as like time goes,
Yeah.
but man, it was a blast to work on. I'm really glad that I got to do it.
How do you go about managing your time? I think you're one of the few people that handles it well, at least from my perspective, right? Like I always kind of try to take notes from you and how you manage to make the time to do all these things that you've got going on, right? As well as fostering your community on Discord, your Twitch channel. How has that been for you over the past couple of years with the pandemic?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate you saying that, because it's not easy. I try really hard. Most of the time it ends up being, making choices about what things are important, and prioritizing, and making sure that the things that need to get done do get done. Right. Like and at first, during the pandemic, I was streaming 3 days a week at first. And then I started to realize as life picked up, I need to bump back to 2. And then right now I'm really only streaming 1 night a week consistently, but it's for that Game Dev Wednesday stream that, that I've committed to. And I want to make sure that I get those interviews out there as often as possible. And so for me, that's about kind of understanding what my real limits are and which things are a little more fluid. And then from day to day, just kind of making sure that I'm doing the things that I need to, that have to get done. And then also, fostering relationships and conversations and stuff like that as I can.
Definitely. Talk to me more about Game Dev Wednesday and Game Dev with a shot of Jameson.
Yeah.
What that's like and how people can check that out.
When I first started streaming, I didn't know what to do exactly, but I knew that I wanted to do something with, all the game dev experience that I have. And so I first started by playing through the games that I worked on. And, I'd play through and talk about them, and it'd take, like 10, 12 episodes each to go through, like a Godfather or a Simpsons game. And, it was fun, and it gave a lot of insight. And I would think of stories that happened in the development, and it was kind of an impromptu thing, and it was fun. Then I got toward the end of my games, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? And then I realized another thing that I have is a lot of contacts. I've worked with a lot of great people in this industry and have some really good friends. So I kind of moved it over to a talk show format, where now what I do is I bring them on. We talk about, hey, how did you get your start? Did you have a education in games or not? Where did you get your break? What's your advice for someone looking to get into the industry? And, we just kind of talk through their experience throughout their career. And sometimes it takes 2, maybe 3 episodes, but it's stuff that I then take and then turn into a podcast that's out there on, YouTube and Spotify and all those great places.
Yeah, I love it. I love the format, to be honest, right? It's very casual, very organic. It's like if people were just hanging out, having a drink, catching up over time, and talking about whatever comes up, right?
Yeah. And I think honestly, that's me. That's kind of how I am. I'm pretty laid back. I love just to get to know people. I love making connections and just chatting with people and getting to know people more than just about anything. So the reason that format kind of stuck for me, and I've been doing it for, close to 2 years now, is I really enjoy it. I literally, it's like I'm grabbing a drink and having a drink with a friend. And in the pandemic, we can be anywhere. We're sitting together. You're having yours, I'm having mine. Same kind of conversation, and just getting to connect and make sure, that I know enough about you and your story and the things that you've gone through. And so I can also use that to help make other connections for people going forward.
Yeah, they're super helpful. I feel like there's a certain group of people that look at game developers as kind of like untouchable or out of reach, or you can't connect with them or complain to them about whatever creative decisions you've made on their favorite products. And what this does is kind of put that more human connection, right? They're like, hey, we're all available on whatever social media or on whatever video, and we're just like you, right? And what I like about it is that you give opportunity to connect and say, hey, I saw you on Game Dev with a shot at Jameson, or how do you know Jameson? And then you kind of create a connection that way, right? And so this industry is all about networking, right? And getting to get to know more people that do the same thing we do.
Yeah, it's really important. And this is one of those things that, you know, like I mentioned before, I do a lot of, you know, talks back at Full Sail, and they often will send me students or potential students that have questions about the industry and stuff like that. And I just really enjoy it. Like, one of the things that is so cool about the game dev industry, and I think anybody that's in it will generally agree, is everyone is nice and everyone wants to be helpful. It's wild. Like, you can talk to somebody that has done one of the most amazing things you've ever worked on and is a god in your eyes, and they will tell you all about it. And not only that, they'll probably ask for your opinion on it. It's really crazy. And I think I try to prepare people just for having those kind of conversations, because it's just really getting to know people and that kind of stuff. That's what networking really is, especially in this industry. Handing someone a business card and getting theirs is not that important. It's about that actual connection that you make.
For sure, for sure. I mean, talk to me about when you were actually looking to go back into game development full time.
Mhm.
What did, how did all the time you spent networking serve you for that?
You know, it's funny. When I first started thinking about it, the reason I started thinking about it was I ran into a buddy's Twitch stream, and he introduced me as someone who used to make games. And I was like, wait a minute. What? Wait a minute. Now, to be fair, at this point, I had been doing esports stuff for almost 2 years, right? So I was even less fully involved in game development. But I'd started to miss it. And when he said that, I was like, oh no, like not that I mind he said it, right? But I was just like, wait, that's not how I feel. And that's when it really clicked for me. I was like, no, I miss it. I need to start doing that again. And the thing that the pandemic taught me was that I can work from home, man. And I did not think that was going to ever be a thing. One of the reasons I moved here to Orlando was so, I could be in a place that I wanted to be, with the theme parks and with the school nearby and all of that stuff. And
weather, sun.
Yeah, right. There's so many benefits to that. I didn't want to give that up. And there's not much, game dev here. So now whenever I'm hearing remote studios, people are having that kind of stuff, I was like, well, let me just kind of, look around a little bit. And then I reached out to a few different friends that, longtime friends at studios that I've always admired. And it was just like, hey, is this something that, what's available? Is it, do you think it'd be a good fit for me? And I actually talked to a few different companies at first. And then, just as I started to go through the process more with Insomniac, I was like, there is so much here that I am excited about, and let's go.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think, what are some of the key considerations whenever you're kind of weighing different studios, different projects, different colleagues? Obviously, remote work probably was the biggest part of that.
That was the thing that was a kind of a non-negotiable for me. I didn't want to go anywhere, because I do love being here physically, or at least having the choice of where I want to live. And, with so much work in, big metropolitan areas where it's more expensive and travel is harder, that's not really what I'm looking for, So that was my really only major thing, was I want to stay here. But then as I was looking around, and it was like, hey, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to find the right opportunity. I have a personal thing where I won't go to a studio as a lead. I don't want to do that. So for me, it was a bit of having lead and director experience can make that tough. So I was looking for an opportunity. It was like, hey, I want to come in and I want to learn. I want to earn the respect of the people. If me becoming a lead at some point makes sense, I'm open to that, but I don't want to come in and suddenly people are answering to me, I don't want to be directing people right away. So that added another little complication to it. And, as I really talked with Insomniac, they talked to me a lot about, hey, we've got these different career paths, right? And something that had been common in the industry for many years was, if you wanted to be promoted, you had to now move into leadership, where now you're no longer making cool stuff. You are helping other people make cool stuff. And I did a lot of that over my career, where I felt like I was impacting the project on a broader scale. And, I was able to kind of do that, but my ability to personally kind of craft something would continue to diminish. And I wanted to see if I could, switch that around. And I've gotten a position now where I get to make great stuff, and I have a lot of autonomy and a lot of, ability to kind of do what I need to do and work with the people that I need to without feeling like I need to, be watching over other people and doing things in that regard.
That's fantastic. I think it's a great message there to send to people that have maybe stuck in one and wanted to do both, or make the transition back and forth, right? Because you give somebody a resume and they see leadership and director experience, and oh yeah, we need somebody with this experience, and we got a spot just for you. When I wish that more places could be more considerate of, like, hey, you have all of this experience, we could use all of it. What if it excites you the most, right? Like, where do
Yeah.
you want to fit in? Second thing that I really appreciate about you, Jameson, is that feeling of coming into a team brand new and all of a sudden having to say, okay, this person that I've never worked with before, now I report to, right? And
Right.
now I have to be managed by. And, there's a two-way relationship there. So I very much like that kind of chance to grow within a team before having to make that call, to be like, oh yeah, I could definitely report to Jameson. Like, let's do it. Let's make it happen. As opposed to like, here's what's coming, here's what's happening. Like it or not,
Yeah.
sorry, tough luck.
It also means a lot less meetings, which is really nice too.
In this day and age with remote being the thing and everything has to be a scheduled meeting, I definitely don't envy any of my directors, leads, managers. Absolutely.
It's also funny you mentioned that, I do have, a pretty large skill set from multiple projects and roles and all of that stuff. And it's nice to be in a position where I can utilize what I've learned in those, like across the board. Like I have the ability to mentor, to help people out, to connect with people and, find good solutions. And I can in the moment do that thing instead of, being like I need to focus everything on a very specific few or anything like that too.
That's awesome. I love that you call that out, where everybody has an opportunity of seniority or experience to be a mentor, even though it's not directly part of your job role, right?
Right. And I think it should be, right? Like I think it should be expected that designers or any discipline with more experience tries to help people understand, how to be more efficient, how to prioritize better, why doing something in more optimal way, or learning that optimal way to do it, where the value is in that, instead of maybe necessarily brute forcing something the way that you've just learned how to do it. And, that's the kind of things that it's really interesting when people are like, well, why did it cost so much for X person to do this thing when they did it so quickly? It's like, well, it was the 20 years it took them to learn to do that quickly that you're paying for, right? Like it's not them just suddenly doing this thing so simply.
I like that. I like that, man. You're just dropping gems out here, right? Like, you don't pay someone for the time that they're giving you. You're paying them for all of the experience that they've amassed to give you something faster, quicker, more efficiently, right? And be able to kind of grow the team under them. Yeah, I love that, right? Like, you usually have, hey, junior chair in butt 8 hours, senior director chair in butt not 8 hours, and like that. There's that whole argument, and so I love that you bring that up, because it's not a one-to-one thing.
Right. But it's also, a benefit for the company where when I do put in those 8 hours every day, I would like to think that is more valuable time than someone who hasn't been doing it for, nearly as long as I have, or in anyone's situation. Right.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly, for sure. You have been, now you are an advanced game designer, and you have been a lead designer, a design director when you were at Volition and even at EA working on some large open world sandbox titles.
Mm-hmm.
I think, what does it mean to you to be a lead and director as opposed to what you're doing now?
It was really interesting. Through the first part of my career, I was always thinking of like, what's my next step? Right. And I had this, 10-year goal of being a director, which is funny that I hit it literally like right around that time. But, as I was going through, the first few years, I felt like I was just learning. I was absorbing. I was trying to get better. I was constantly being surrounded by people that were way better than I was and kept pushing me, not really, but, it drove me to be better. And, then as I got up to working on the Simpsons game and I got my first lead role, that's where I got to taste that I'm a big picture thinker, so I'm really good at kind of understanding where all of the bits kind of come together and how they affect each other. And I realized that, you know, I can do that on scale, right? So as I moved up, I was able to still continue to do that. It meant that I didn't get to do as much hands-on work as I wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And early on Saints Row 4, I was in spreadsheets or in documents and spreadsheets. That's it, right? And that was in a way soul crushing, right? Because like I didn't get to do something tangible, which was when I went through school, I learned like that hands-on, let me script, let me code, let me build. That's what I loved. And now I'm just enabling and helping, you know, create boxes for other people to do great stuff within. And so when I, you know, moving up through there and finding that I was doing well with it and enjoying it overall, but then getting to the point where I was like, that was part of why I kind of made that change when I did, because I felt like I'd kind of, you know, excelled up to a spot where I couldn't make a lot of movement anymore. As far as like, there wasn't a whole lot of, you know, I was a principal designer, which was the highest, you know, level at the studio. I had great respect for the people around me, but at the same time, there wasn't like that next person above me that I'm, you know, trying to learn from and achieve what they have. So there's a bit of that climb that started to decline too. And so that's when I think I needed a bit of a reset, you know, but there's also the fear when you do something like I did and you don't do, you know, full-time game dev, you know, all the time for a while, it could be harder to get back in, right? Like it could be hard to kind of find that right spot that makes sense. Luckily, I didn't have that problem, but it was a fear that I had for a while.
Yeah. Do you think that you weren't all the way out because
Right.
all the extracurricular activities you were doing, you were not only speaking about it on a regular cadence with your network in a public forum, but you were also teaching on it or being around it, right? When you were on the Full Sail campus, does it ever really leave you, right? Like, I guess this is a good topic for people in similar situations on the outside looking in, whether that's by choice, whether that's family sacrifices, whether that's took a sabbatical. You know, what words do you have for those people?
You know, that's tough. I don't think there's a complete answer to that or a single one, right? Because the case for me was, I think I was a little burnt out. I think I wanted to try some things, you know, new and a little different. And then, you know, after about 4 years, I realized, you know, I miss, and what I really missed, and this is the thing that really caught me, was the problem solving. I'm a
Oh,
problem solver, man. And that's what game design is. It's every day. Even if I'm solving a problem I've solved before, I'm now doing it on a new game with new tools with a new team. And even if I tried to solve it exactly the same way as I did before, it might not even be the right way to do it. So constantly kind of evaluating and figuring out how to solve the problems that we deal with day to day, how to make this enemy do what you want them to do, how to make sure this level loads the proper way. Like there's just so many things from small to large that constantly need someone to fix them. And I love it.
you're absolutely right. I love it. You've mentioned this in a few of your contents out there, right? As game designers, at our core essence, we are problem solvers
Yeah.
more than anything else, right? More, I think you've also mentioned that the common misconception out there is that we are the idea people and it's our job to make up the idea and then the team goes off and runs with it and builds the idea.
Yeah, that's that's one of my biggest pet peeves. There are like a handful of people that do that, and there are not many of those people. And I don't want to be that person, right? Like I want to be someone that crafts, and you know, and and that's the thing. This whole experience kind of taught me was that I need to have my hands in the tools at least a little bit, you know.
Totally, totally. Is there a common enough problem out there that you've kind of seen the pattern of like this one always keeps cropping up and it has many different shades and it never gets dull? Or on the other end of that, how come the industry has not figured out a core solution to the door, right? Something like that.
You know, I think the problem is, one, we don't have enough common language in this industry even. Like every time I go to a studio, they'll call something similar something different. And I'm like, well, I get why you call it that, but this other thing we called it was essentially the same thing. And so there's a lot of kind of relearning terms and that kind of stuff. And there's also a bit of like, I think we need to get a little bit better at kind of sharing our tech. and not even necessarily saying like, here's our tech, but more of like, get a more group general understanding of how like simple problems should be solved. Cause like we shouldn't be recreating the wheel all the time. You know what I mean? And like button layouts and stuff become standards for a reason. And, you know, like, and we can find ways to improve it and get better, but it's, I don't know, when you find something that works, it seems like we should all be like, yeah, that works. Let's do that thing again. And then let's improve in areas that need to be improved.
100. Yeah, I think I love that idea of more common shared vocabulary, language, right? Every studio kind of came up on their own, building their own project because it didn't exist before, or they wanted to do it with their own team or own people or build their own tech. And there's initiatives, right? You see the GDCs, you see the Gamescoms, the DICE conferences. There's so many out there, but for everyone, there's definitely room for like 10 more in every geography or platform, you know, mobile, things like that. For your time when you were back at our alma mater on the other end of things, being able to kind of contribute to the academic space, right, and help kind of en masse equip people coming up through the program. What was some of the big takeaways there, being on that end of it? Like, what were some of the trends that you saw kind of emerging, that really served some of the students coming up?
You know, one of the big things that I learned is, and you've had some experience with this when you work with, like, as part of an advisory council where you come in and you're like, hey, let me look at the curriculum. Let me take a couple of days to give you some feedback on industry trends and things that they should be learning or not focusing on anymore. That information is great. And I've always had a lot of that information, but getting a change to a college curriculum is like turning the Titanic, man. It's a big endeavor. And because there's so many things, like for accreditation, there have to be these goals that are met, and these things were written at this one point, and those cannot be reevaluated until X time later. And like, so, and like, we want to make this change, and that means these other things need to change, which means also if it's a big enough change, you have to graduate people out of the program as it was before you make this new change. So it's just like, there's so many things, and it's just like game development, and where you have to be thinking about like, okay, I'm a designer, I'm going to make this change. And then art comes in and is like, well, wait, but now the pretty thing we wanted to put there that was also functional doesn't work. So what are we going to do in place of that? And then animation comes in and goes, I just spent 2 days making an animation for that thing that you want to change now. Right. So it's like, there's all of these kind of constant things that are connected to each other that we have to consider. And that's a big part of like that understanding, you know, the bigger picture of everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest skills you mentioned that was so key that you developed in getting to that leadership or director role, right, is that big picture, being able to see all the moving pieces and be able to kind of identify those and call those out for the people that aren't privy to it, that don't realize, like, hey, it's just this small change. It should take a milestone or a month. And it's like, well, actually, this is the chain of dependencies and checks and balances and who needs to sign off, right?
There's another piece to it too, though, which is which I think is the most important skill as a developer, period, which is communication, right? Like, our individual skill set is about solving problems, but we've got to make sure everyone understands what the problem is, why it's a problem, and then work with them to find the right solution, because the solution is going to touch everyone that's working near that part of the game or whatever you're working on, right? So getting people on the same page with you is so important.
That's one of the biggest skills that I find myself still learning, still working on, still flexing, still doing my reps on. What can you tell me? Whoa, actually, let me turn that back. What's some of your key insight for being a better communicator that just always helps?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, and I realized that this had become true for me when I started this new job, because, you know, it's something that I had developed over time, learned over time, felt like that I had a grasp on, and then I finally realized that it's true. And that's one, I don't need to be the person that's always talking, right? You need to listen, because I am someone who will quickly have an idea of a solution in my head. And I used to be someone that would quickly give that solution, right? Instead, what I do is I have that solution in my head off to the side as something that I think might work. right? And so then when we're having a conversation, I'm listening. I'm like, I think I understand the problem, but let's make sure I understand the problem. And I'll ask someone, what is your perception of the problem? How does this affect your work? What does your discipline think about this? And then I start piecing all that stuff together. And then I either look at that solution I had to the side and be like, okay, that's still a decent solution. Let me present that. Or I start to mold that solution. Or I'm like, you know what? I actually had no idea what I was talking about. I'm glad I didn't say anything at all. And now let's talk about a different solution.
That one comes up for me a lot, Jameson. The wait and listen, write my idea down on the side, and then realize, whoa, I had grossly misinterpreted that. Thank goodness I didn't open my mouth. Or having to bite the bullet and admit that I didn't know what the heck I was talking about, but it also kind of create the opportunity for the rest of the team to kind of get aligned because they were sharing the same misconception, but were too timid to say something.
Sure. Yeah. And that's another thing that you have to think about too, is understanding the people in the room, because there are some people, and this is something that I've tried to become much more aware of, which is all the different personality types. And, you know, and especially in remote work, people are silent sometimes because they're just not comfortable in that setting. Right. And one of the things I'll do at times is, instead of like interrupting a meeting to ask a clarifying question or something, I'll send a Slack message to that person and just be like, hey man, I was just kind of curious about this. You know, now I prefer one-on-one communication personally, so I can have that conversation afterwards about it, and I'm not interrupting anyone else. But you do, in that case, potentially lose someone else hearing that answer to that question that they had as well, and you didn't even know about.
Totally. Some of the biggest pros of remote work and the new paradigm that we're all in is being able to kind of slack people on the side for these little clarification or insights that people can get to when they have the time versus
Right.
something that may kind of like leave you, or you didn't have a chance to bring it up in the meeting and then the person's day is like completely booked or something like that.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's been the thing that I've really loved about working remotely with a company that's currently almost fully remotely, is everybody's kind of on different time zones, and the level of respect that everyone has for each other's time has been mind blowing. It's literally, but there's been times where someone's like, I know it's the end of your day, I'll talk to you tomorrow about this. Like, or, and me being on the East Coast and a bulk of our company being on the West Coast, I get like 4 hours every morning where almost no one needs me. So I get to just like crank away at stuff, get stuff done. And I'm super productive, you know, in this time. And then, you know, then I kind of structure my day where I'm like, okay, my afternoon is going to be a little more, you know, collaboration and some meetings and that kind of thing. So it's really neat to kind of like, you know, come in the morning with my pajamas and coffee and just kind of like jam out for 4 hours and get stuff done. Like that's the dream.
100%. There are opportunities in here that are kind of unwritten, right? Is where is the core of your team based out of? And then does that mean that you start earlier, finish earlier, start later, finish later? Or do you have these nice pockets of undisturbed time because the core team is done with their day or hasn't
Yeah.
started yet, that you can focus and block out for the things you really wanted to get to?
Yeah. It's nice because we have like core hours, right? Where we like for everybody to be around. So you got that time in the middle, but there has never been a like, hey, you should work later or earlier to accommodate anyone else. It's always been, hey, this is the time I would like to work. I'm available for everyone during this chunk of time where we all agreed that we would be. Other than that, you know, if I'm not around yet, I'll get to your message in the morning, and everyone, and vice versa. I've learned that the Slack send message later feature has become my best friend, because I send stuff at 9 a.m.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, I'm going to send it to actually go at like noon or 1 p.m. so that it's 9 or 10 a.m. for them.
I'll plus 1,000 the Slack send message later feature. I love it. I wish that it was better about telling you the time zone of the person you're going to send it to.
Oh, ours does that.
Yours
I
does
wonder if
that?
maybe that's something to do with the person having it set up individually or something. I don't know.
Yeah. You know what? You're going to make me check that. I think some of the default options are like, it's so and so time for this person. But yeah, it's a handy tool. One of the best things we got in this remote work, especially across time zones.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fell into esports management, my friend, but that's one of the coolest roles that you've had. And I love it because I'm a big sports fan, and when I went to Full Sail, I always dreamed or wished that we had a team that we can go support and watch games with after class or in between classes or something like that. How was your time being a manager for Full Sail's Armada?
Yeah, that was the reason you said is exactly why I was excited about it. You know, I grew up playing sports, rooting for teams, and there was none of that at Full Sail, right? And so then now as I'm there and I see one, it's obviously something that's been gaining popularity in, you know, in regular world for quite a while. But then starting to see that, hey, Full Sail's got some club programs, they're starting to kind of organize around it. And as they developed, you know, the first esports teams, and as they were starting to, you know, uh, form those teams, I was in town for Hall of Fame, and they said, hey, do you want to, you know, basically come host this event and you know, kind of be the on camera talent for this while we kind of bring these people in to do this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And then when I saw what they were doing, I was like, oh man, like this is the thing that's up and coming. People are getting excited about this. It's really a nice touch for something like you mentioned that as students and alumni, we would love to kind of get behind. I want to get more involved in this. So for the first couple of years I was there, I was just volunteering time. I was like helping them figure things out, doing what I could, you know, helping organize things. And then it got to a point where they were going to fully organize around this and build a full program. And they needed a director of esports operations. And at that point I was toiling with a choice. Do I want to move toward being the program director of game design, which was my next move, or do I want to move over and direct something entirely new? And I was like, you know what? I got to take that shot. I'm excited about it. And I was like, I need to see what that's going to be like. And there was a lot of great parallels. You know, it was the team building side of things is what I used most. You know, a whole lot of like, hey, here's how we're going to organize. Here's how we're going to like handle tryouts. Here's how we're going to pick the people for our rosters, those kind of things. And, you know, at first it was all in person before the pandemic. So we got the ball rolling in a normal world. Then about a year later, it was, you know, chaos and what are we going to do now? And everybody's at home. So then that's when we started the full, you know, kind of allowing online students, and most of the industry kind of moved into an online format for most of the pandemic as well. So, and that was an extra challenge, you know, so I had a couple of years there with that where I was like, this is really cool. It's really neat. I'm really enjoying it. And then I got to that point where I was like, you know, but I really am starting to miss, you know, the game dev stuff. And that's when, you know, that change started to happen for me.
What was the hottest game when you were GMing on the circuit?
So we played 8 games. And the biggest one, like Smash, always has a really good following, and it's fun and it's cute, but it's mostly in person. The online is not great competitively in Smash. Right. But the biggest games for us were League of Legends and Call of Duty. That was our two biggest. We had a really good Overwatch team too, but man, that Call of Duty team, they finished top 12 in the country the 2 years that I was with them. So it was couple and 2 very different rosters. So it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot as far as like watching these kids play. And I'm just like, listen, I am not a coach. I am not here. I will never be able to help you play a game better. But what I can do is I can make sure that you're organized. I can make sure you have all the resources you need. I can make sure you get the support you need. Like, and you know, we'll get people in here to help you get better. But man, that is not me.
What were some of the resources that you had to go get that I guess surprised you?
You know, I didn't. So equipment obviously is one thing. We built a really nice practice space where they would come in and they had top of the line equipment to play in. But you know, that was harder to do during the pandemic, right? So then we had to kind of rely on them to, you know, have their own machines, and not everybody does. So sometimes we would need to lend them equipment or give them, you know, hardware and stuff so that they could effectively play when they weren't, you know, able to be on location. But the other big thing was most of the support that I gave was educational, and that was interesting to me because, you know, when you have an athletic department, which we finally do, or they finally do, there's requirements. and there's a minimum GPA requirement and things like that. So a lot of my job was constantly monitoring grade point averages to make sure that players are still eligible. And because Full Sail works monthly, every month I'm having to look at that stuff, right? So, and it was really interesting because, you know, the first thing I would do is I would reach out to someone and be like, hey man, your GPA is starting to creep down into an unacceptable level. And then it was like, what can we do for you? What, you know, talk to them about the degree program they're in, the classes they're going through. Is it an extra stressful time right now? Are you extra busy? Is there anything in your life going on, you know, that's, you know, impacting this that you could get some support for? Is there, you know, like, what can we do to help make sure that, and this is where the GPA was the kickstart of the conversation, but it quickly moved to the side, right? Because now it's, hey, this guy or gal's struggling, right? Mm-hmm. And we need to talk about how to help them get better, how to help them improve their situation. And that was sometimes hard, you know, like there was sometimes some conversations where, you know, they would go into a bit of like, hey, there's this stuff going on at home. And so luckily there was tons of resources of like, hey, we've got lots of counselors, we've got lots of even financial aid, and, you know, and sometimes people are like, I've lost some of my money, you know, and like, it's just like those kind of things where I'm like, hey, I'm not personally equipped to help you with this, but the good news is we got lots of resources. Let's talk about it. We'll get you in touch with the people here that can help you with this. You are absolutely not alone, and we will get this. And then sometimes I could actually help them with something. You know, they're like, hey, I've got this problem with, you know, I'm working on this this thing for school, and I'm getting stuck on something. I'm like, hey, did you talk to this person? Did you look at this thing? You know, and there's ways that I can actually kind of help them, steer them in the right direction as well.
When you were a Full Sail student back earlier in your career,
long time ago,
you and I had some conversations, and you told me that some of your most fondest memories of the curriculum was getting a chance to link up and learn from Dave Arneson,
oh man,
the creator of Dungeons and Dragons. Rest in peace. What was that time under him like for you? What was one of your biggest lessons that he taught you?
Man, it was really humbling, first of all. And the interesting thing was I had just started playing D&D when I got to Full Sail. And so you too? Nice.
Yeah.
And me and some classmates were actually playing a game. We had one going most of the time. And by the time we got to his class, it was great because I was like, hey, we actually are experiencing this right now. We can talk to you about what we're experiencing. And there was two moments that I will never forget. One was the day he ran a one shot for us. So here we are, like the 8 of us in class. He hands us all a character, and he's like, "We're gonna play a 4-hour campaign today." And I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me!" But he also handed us a boxed version of the game that had a leather dice bag in it with a set of dice, which I have over here on my shelf still, that I will have until I breathe my last breath. But my son, I told him, I was like, someday they'll be yours. And he's like, can I have them now? I'm like, no, absolutely not. You can take them from my cold, dead hands.
Heck yeah.
But no, man, it was wild. Like to have that experience, and all of us being players, it was a very good experience. And and he seemed to enjoy it, and we did. And it was just one of those moments where, like, if I would have loved to have video of that, right? Like that just wasn't a thing we did in 1999. Or 2000. So that was something that was just super special. And the other thing, oddly timed, is the Dungeons and Dragons movie came out while I was in his class. And so he took us all to the movie. He got us all tickets to the premiere in Orlando. And we got there, and he was decked out in wizard garb, like full on. And he had been in the movie, and he was in one of these towers, and he was wearing his costume, and we were all just like, yo, like this was awesome. And we're all watching the movie. And if you haven't seen it, it's not great at all. And this is one of those times where I was like, all right, man, you got to do the right thing here. And he comes over, he's like, what did you guys think? And we're all like, yeah, man, it was awesome. It was great. We had to, because like it would have broken his heart if we were like, oh man. But still, like a top memory of my life. Those are two things that I'll never forget. Absolutely.
there's two schools of game design. There's probably like a million, right? But I break it down into two, right? There's the one designer that comes from a technical background, super proficient in tooling or what have you, right? And can kind of build whatever they're imagining. And there's another world that comes from the D&D, DMing realm. What do you think it is about being a dungeon master or playing D&D that makes or contributes to a game designer's tool bag?
First of all, I'll say I am not a DM.
Me neither.
I am not. I don't have the memory or the patience. That's just not me. I want to experience it. But even from the experiencing side, it's about rules. It's about understanding why things are built the way that they are, right? And D&D is a game where there's obviously lots of rules that crush each other and things like that. But ultimately, when you look down at each thing, it fits in the world in some way, right? Like it makes sense somehow. The limitations that it has, even if it's powerful in one way, it's going to be weak in another, right? And these are the kind of things that game design and development is all about, which is, you just think about a simple, attack and dodge and block, like these simple interactions that are like, this attack works against these three things, rock, paper, scissors,
Rock, paper, scissors.
And it ends up being like D&D is a world full of that, where it's like, even when it looks like there is no hope, there's always this one thing that can happen, right? You can think of something or some way to use something that someone didn't think about doing that way, right? And on top of that, the DM, if they're a good one, will be like, you know what? Even if it's not written down in this tome, one of these tomes somewhere, I like what you're trying to do. I think it makes sense. Roll a die and we'll see if you're successful. It might be a 1 in 20 chance, right? Or 1 in 100, but still there's a chance. And that's that's what you have to think as a designer is, how am I going to solve this problem? What do I want the player to experience? What rules have we set for them? What's their state of mind right now? And what do I do to help them understand what they should do? Like, there's just so much of that stuff that's constantly going on.
Totally, right? Defining the rule set for the space, figuring out what those rules enable players to do. And then the beauty of it too, right, in this day and age of live games and games as a service and streaming, is seeing players do things you never even imagined were possible in that rule set that you had like so explicitly defined and laid out for years.
Man, right. So one of the reasons I'm really glad that one of the first classes Full Sail has is writing rules for a game is because people don't understand how specific you have to be, right? Because like everybody's going to read something and their experiences and knowledge are going to be put on top of what they're reading. So if you're not super specific, it could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And so that's man. And that goes to writing design documents, right? Or any kind of communication, which is why I said before, communication is so important.
Design documentation is a great one. I'm glad you brought that up. Is what rules do you have for yourself, or kind of how do you approach laying out a design doc with, your team?
My general philosophy is to be as straight to the point as possible. I am a list person whenever possible. I'm not a flavor text person. Now, what I tend to do is I do tend to give like a quick overview of what this is going to describe, and then the rules, and then maybe a couple of examples, right? And so that I think that generally, and this is just kind of my personal philosophy, right? Whenever you work somewhere, they already have a standard, right? And so there's a bit of, I'm going to do it in this format, but my style is still kind of going to be in here. I'm not going to write a paragraph about something I could say in 3 words. So that's kind of my philosophy in general. I'm a 1-page design doc person. I think most things should be able to fit in 1 page. If it's more than that, then it's probably needs to be broken up into separate things somehow. But that's generally the way that I approach it.
I love that. Be concise, fit it on 1 page. The expectation is that your coworkers will read it all, but if that first page kind of doesn't nail the core concept well enough, I'm not going to get through it. I can at least talk for myself for sure.
Yeah.
You had time at Volition working on some amazing IPs, in particular in the crazy open world sandbox that is Saints Row and even some of their other titles. I have to know what type of craziness came up during pre-production on Saints Row 4.
Saints Row 4 was interesting because we were an interesting place as a company, and we were working on Saints Row 4. It was my first design director role, and the rest of the Saints Row team was still working on Saints Row the Third, and so there was a bit of like we were getting ahead on getting pre-production stuff out of the way before the team started to roll in. So we had a small team, but still a very interesting and fun team that was doing a lot of the early planning and figuring out the core concepts and that kind of stuff. And man, I don't know how much I can even say about the actual ideas, but I will say that the freedom of creativity in making a Saints Row game was very refreshing, because there was no such thing as a bad idea, right? And it would be like, okay, maybe that idea is not the best for right now or whatever we're going to do, but sometimes somebody would say something that would sound completely outlandish at first, and then 2 months later it's molded into something that makes sense and is now being prototyped. And I loved it. And the ideas, this was really my favorite part of that, was the ideas came from everywhere. Like our weapons artist made like some really cool stuff. Like we had random people coming up with ideas for things. It was just, people got into it. And the more you get passionate and care about what you're working on, the more that kind of creative flow starts to come up, and then you'll take things that you think are funny or interesting and try to meld that together and be like, what if it were something like this? And that can go from some simple interaction in the world to a whole mission built around something.
Is that common on most game development teams, where kind of the gameplay ideas kind of come from any discipline, not just design?
I've seen it in various ways, right? I think it first of all depends on the state of the project, where you're at in development, right? The earlier in the project, the better chance that ideas are going to come from around. And, when the team is smaller, they kind of tend to spread around too. I think when the teams get bigger and people have more dedicated tasks that are in their discipline, they tend to spend less time thinking about stuff outside of what they're trying to do day to day. So I think as you move into the project, it's usually more of the design team kind of moving with ideas that kind of change, the context, or coming up with things that kind of enhance or alter the gameplay. That's obviously not a standard rule or steadfast rule. I've seen incredible ideas come from everyone, and sometimes places that you don't expect, right? Like, and there have been times where like, we've had like, janitorial staff make a side comment about something, and we were like, that's actually really funny. Like, like those kind of things will happen. It's just like when you're around it and you start to understand it and you see what people are going through, and you see that most of what we do is talk about something for a while. We're like, hey, I got this idea. How does this sound to you? Would it work with this? And we'll bounce things off of each other, and anyone can kind of get involved in that, and it can spark an idea.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's it, right? Is in terms of that, not only being kind of key communicators on the team, but being kind of like fanners of the idea flames, right? Like creating this big kitchen pot that people can just keep throwing ingredients into, and kind of fostering that conversation to build, to really help this kind of idea mature and harden and get some legs into
Yeah.
something that would make sense for the game.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's another lesson that I had to learn kind of over time, was that I don't have to have all the answers. And as a matter of fact, I no longer assume I will have the answer to something, right? What I now assume is that I'll find it, right? And I know what questions to ask. I understand the problem. I may have a solution, but ultimately, like we kind of mentioned before, my solution may not be the most informed one or the right one to do. So most of the time, if I have an answer, I'm obviously going to give it, but I'll say, you know what, let me look into that, and we'll figure it out. And it may be that someone else I talk to about it may have an idea way better than something I was going to mention.
That's it. My friend, I for one cannot express to you how happy I am that your journey in game development has brought you back into the fold. We're helping you create more for us to play. Specifically, I'm a big comic book geek and fan of the whole Marvel universe and all the other ones, DC, everything like that. particularly looking forward to what's to come for Spider-Man 2 out of Insomniac and your team. Thank you so much for your time, Jameson. Do you have any closing words for the listeners out there?
I first of all, I feel like I'm living a dream right now because Spider-Man is my favorite superhero and open world games are my favorite ones to work on. So I'm literally stepping into an ideal situation. So I feel very, very lucky. But the truth is this industry is an interesting one. And I think it's one that takes a lot of passion. And I think the reason that those of us that have been in it for a while is because we care a lot about it. But the thing that's really nice about that is that door is open to anyone. Like, this is not a hard industry to get into if you really want to do it and you take the steps to learn how to do it. So if this is something you're interested in, man, like, let's go, let's figure it out and you can do this too.
What's a great starting point for someone kind of scratching at the door, being like, I think I want to do game development. Where do I even start?
Well, I mean, there's a few options. One, you should definitely come check out my live stream and podcast.
Game Dev with a Shot at Jameson
right.
and Jameson Durall at twitchtv.com. For sure, those links are going in.
That's right. But there's a lot of knowledge out there, man. There's first of all, game engines like Unreal and Unity are super accessible and have tutorials built in. You can grab one of those. Like Unreal right now has like tutorials built into it. So you just go in, you're like, hey, here's the thing you want to do. Here's where you press. Here's what it does. And you can start to get a feel of like, do you like working in an engine? Do you like kind of having that be the thing that most of your day kind of revolves around? And, I think that's something that's really easy to kind of, get a grasp of. And the other thing is like, find a game that you enjoy that has modding tools. And then you can jump in and be like, I know this game. I understand this game. If I were to build something for this game, what would that be? And then learn those tools and try to do it. And you'll immediately start to find out if you're interested in it and what kind of things goes into actually, making a simple level or building out an environment or whatever your forte is. And sometimes you just got to tinker with it a bit to find out, are you interested in it? And then you can start to learn whatever that skill or technique is to actually get you a job in the industry.
There you have it, folks. Straight from the man himself. Pro tips on checking out and breaking into this wonderful industry and contributing to the space, right? If there's not games that you yourself don't love, come in and make them. You can do it. Jameson, thank you so much for your time, brother. I'll catch you on the other side.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it. Good talking to you.
Likewise, man.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. You can follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play, subscribe to us on YouTube or any other podcasting service. And I'll see you guys next week for the next episode.